Hi guys, I'm Rick Harris. I've been involved in Christmas lighting for a little over 6 years. I'm part of the FPP development team, and I'm here to give you guys some tips on troubleshooting your light show, otherwise known as when things don't go blinky flashy. I'm going to give you some tips on how to figure out what's wrong, but there's too many variables to cover everything. Everyone shows different designs, different controllers, different layouts, but hopefully I'll give you enough information for you to be able to find and fix your problem. Don't assume that because it worked yesterday, last year, 10 minutes ago, that it can't break. Things can always break, and they break at the most inopportune time. So when something isn't working, test everything. Don't skip over it. So this video is going to be a little bit on the long side, but I want to go into some details to help you out. So first off, I want to go into pixels, how they work, and some of the common things. If you want to skip, I've got chapters down below so that you figure out where you want to go and skip part of it. But if not, and you want to hang on and join the ride, I'm going to go over how they work, and hopefully that'll help you be able to identify your problem a little bit easier. So pixels are very simple beasts. They're based on the WS2811 or 28XX protocol, which is pretty ingenious the way it works. Each pixel is individually addressable, but they don't have an address. So it seemed kind of weird that it could do it, but what it does is I correlate it to the song 99 Bottles of Beer on the Wall. You got 99 bottles of beer on the wall, you take one down, pass it around, now you have 98 bottles of beer on the wall. So a pixel is going to stay the same color until it gets a signal telling them to change, even if that means turning it off, which basically tells it to play black. So if you give it a signal and it's working, it's going to stay that color till you tell it to do something different. So let's give you kind of an example. So here we got 10 pixels, and the controller is outputting 10 data packets. You see here all of those indicate a different color. So the first pixel, it receives that packet. It says, hey, the first color is red. I'm going to light myself up red, and then I'm going to drop that red from the packet, and I'm going to pass that on. It doesn't know how many pixels came before it or how many pixels are after it. It just blindly follows the instructions. So it sends that package down the wire to the next one. The next pixel says, hey, I'm supposed to be B, so I'll light myself up blue. I'll drop that blue from the packet, and I'm going to pass it on. And like I said, they don't know how many before or after. They're going to go through the process. The next pixel green, drops it, passes it on. Purple, drops it, passes it on. And it keeps on going down the chain. Lights himself up purple. This guy says, I'm yellow, lights myself up yellow, drops it down. But wait, this pixel here isn't lit up. Well, I kind of lied to you. I said there was 10 pixels, there's really 11. If the controller only thinks there's 10 pixels, it's only going to send out data for 10 pixels, and you can see because there's no more data left, it doesn't line up. So controller configuration could have a component in why pixels don't work. So what does it need for a pixel to work? They're actually quite simple. A pixel only needs 3 things to work. It needs enough voltage or current. It needs the LED to be working, which that's needless to say, I mean obvious. And it needs to get a proper signal. If it doesn't get a signal, it's not going to light up. So how do we test this with test equipment? If we have these pixels and we want to be able to it's not working, how do we test to find out the problem? So you go from to test if there's enough voltage or current. You can use a multimeter, or you can use an F-test. I've got this F-test here. It's a neat little tool from Pixel Controller. I think it's like $85. I could be wrong. And it's a neat little tool. You don't have to have one. It does make some of the testing a little bit easier, and depending on your show, how extravagant it is, it might be very beneficial to you. So it's something to consider. Then you have the working LED. How do you tell if that LED is working itself? You use a pixel tester or an F-test, or if it's connected to a receiver has a test button. Most receivers have a test button on it that you could press, and it doesn't require any configuration on the receiver, and you can test from there. Or you can test directly from the controller or X lights, but those require that the controller is configured correctly. One thing, when you're testing pixels to see if pixels are functional from X lights, don't test from the sequencer page. Test from the controller test page. So now that we know how to test that, the voltage and current and the working LED, there's only one other thing that we need to be able to test. And that's the proper signal, but that gets complicated. Depending on how and where you're testing, there could be several signals and protocols involved in getting the signal to where you're actually testing it. So you could have network data involved, you could have sequence data, you could have player data, you could have the controller, and then the controller itself has a bunch of data that it sends out. It could be sending out differential data to receivers, smart or dumb. It could be sync data from a player, sending it out to other controllers. It could be pixel data from the data connected directly to the ports. And it might even be DMX data if you're testing. I know we're talking about pixels, but sometimes you're using the DMX data as well. So how do we test these with test equipment? Well, let's start with network. We're not really going to go into network troubleshooting because that's a whole class in itself, but you can test it with a Wireshark, but that's going to be for high-end people that know what they're doing. But you probably should get a cable tester because the cables that we use are not designed to be rolled up and stretched out. They're designed to be rolled out one time, stapled in place so there's no movement, and that's it. The wires in them are very thin, and they can break, and they can break very easily. So a cable tester would be a good thing to get because, like I said, those wires can break. Let's go to the rest of it, what's more common. Okay, so the controller outputs. So the pixel data. How do you test the pixel data? Well, you can use an oscilloscope or a logic analyzer. Most people don't have those, and even if you do have them, it's pretty technical to understand the protocol to know how it works. So we're not going to use that. But you can use an F-test. An F-test, like I said, has a lot of functionality. It'll actually show you what data is coming out, so you can see if it's sending out the right data. Differential data, same thing, oscilloscope, logic analyzer, but you're not going to do that anyway. You can use the F-test. So then you have the sync data. There's really no way to test the sync data. You can with the logic analyzer. But the easier way is looking at the status page and on the remote, and it'll tell you if it's receiving the information. If it's not receiving the information, then go to the player, check that out, and then go from there. DMX data, logic analyzer, oscilloscope, or F-test. So say we don't have an F-test or any of this other fancy equipment. Then what do we do? Well, there's workarounds. There's always ways that you can figure out what's going on without any of this test equipment. So for proper current voltage, what you do is a tongue test. Stick your tongue like you do a 9-volt battery. No, don't do that. Really, for the proper current and voltage, you have to have a proper test tool. A voltometer in this hobby is almost an essential. You need to get a voltometer. So a working LED, you can do what I call the bait and switch. You take that string of pixels, just the string itself, not the pigtail, anything else. You can move it over to a port that you know is working on the controller, properly configured. Proper signal, same thing. Move it over. You don't want to move the pigtail or change the Phoenix connectors or anything. You want to move just the string itself. You want to isolate just that string. So let's get into a little bit of testing theory. You're going to start with the pixels and work your way back. Pixel failures are way more common than controller failures. So start where the problem is more than likely to be. So you want to isolate it. So say we have this situation here. We have the snowflake. We got going into a receiver. It's going into a controller. It's going into a network switch. over to a player, and then into your controller, into your computer. So if the snowflake isn't working, test just the snowflake with that receiver test button and see if all the pixels are working. If all the pixels aren't working, now you know it's in that snowflake itself. If it is working, but it wasn't working for the sequence, then you know it's something else. It could be the controller, could be the player, something else. So isolate the problem. Then evaluate the problem. When you figure out where it is, figure out what's causing the problem, and then fix it. After you fix it, rinse and repeat. Test again. You might have had more than one problem going on, and you might have fixed just one of the problems, but there could be more. So now let's get into what some of the common problems that we see. One pixel out. You have a pixel in the middle of the string. It's black, and the ones before it are playing, and the ones after it are playing. You got a partial string out. More commonly, it's the last part of the string, but it could be the beginning part. You could have the pixels playing fine, and then the rest of the string are just totally black. The entire string out. Nobody wants to join the party on this one. You got one pixel that's just the wrong color. It might be typically in this case, it's the right color most of the time, but then there's some of the colors that it's just a totally wrong color. It's like purple or yellow or something like that. Multiple pixels, the wrong color. So it looks like it's trying to play the pattern it's supposed to be, but they're the wrong colors. Or it could be just, that they're just a jumbled mess. Flickering. Flickering, you got pixels, either the whole string or partway down the string or something, where they're just kind of flickering different colors. Or even the right color, but it's like they're strobing on and off. You can have pixels stuck on solid white. The pixels are on white, and they won't turn off to save your soul unless you power down the controller. And the last one is you got the first 6 pixels white, and the rest are odd colors. So that's the most common problems that you'll see. So let's find out what the most common causes are for all of these. And this will probably be a reference for you later. So if you have one pixel out, so let's refer back to what we were talking about. A pixel only needs 3 things to work. Enough voltage current. So one pixel out, the pixels before it have enough voltage and current, and the pixels after it have enough voltage current. I don't think that voltage current is jumping over. Correct data signal. Well, the pixels before it are working fine. The pixels after it are working fine. Again, that data is not typically going to just jump over. Now, working LED. Yeah, that sounds like it's a more common issue. So with one pixel out, it's typically a bad pixel, or not as common. It could be the controller's not configured correctly. There could be a misconfiguration in the strings, or the model could be incorrect. These two are not common, but you don't want to rule it out. So the next one is a partial string out. Yep. So you have the pixels going up to a certain point lit up, then the rest of them out. I'm talking about the 3 things it needs: enough voltage current. Well, if that pixel is dead, it's not going to go from there. Same thing with all the rest. So the common causes is a bad pixel at the point of failure, or a bad pixel right before the point of failure, because maybe that pixel at the output side, the data or the V plus or V negative are broken, so it's not going to be going over. Less common is controller or model configuration, but it could be that you have it in the wrong port or something like that, so that it's not configured for the right number of pixels. It could be voltage drop if you're using regulated pixels. Regulated pixels will control more pixels typically, but when the voltage drop gets down to a threshold, then it won't pass that voltage on anymore. So common cause of entire string out. Well, that one is a lot of things. It could be the first pixel could be bad. More commonly we see is the string wired backward or incorrectly. We've had a lot of people come in and not realize that pixels are directional, and they have to be wired to the correct side. There's a data in and a data out, and that has to be done. It could be a controller configuration. You might have it configured for 0 ports. We've seen that quite a bit, where people will get a new controller. They want to see blinky flashy. They throw some pixels on. They press the test button, or they go into the test page, and nothing happens. Well, that port might have been configured for 0 pixels. So the controller says, I have 0 pixels. I'm not going to tell anybody what to do. Could be a bad pigtail. Like I mentioned, they can go bad. And I have gotten 2 of them actually from the manufacturer that were bad. If you're using receivers, it could be a bad network cable going to the receivers. So the next one is 1 pixel the wrong color. That almost always is a bad pixel. I have yet to see, or anyone to prove to me otherwise, that there's anything other than the bad pixel, just 1 pixel. So you just replace that pixel. So the next one is multiple pixels the wrong color. The common causes of that is if you have a color shift mid-string, that's going to be a universe size mismatch. If you're using E131 data, then you need to make sure that the universe size on the controller, the players, and everybody are all the matching. They don't have to all be the same by controller, but in the player and X lights, for that controller, it has to match what that controller thinks it is. So the most common are 510 or 512 channels per universe. Either one is fine. Older controllers, when we first started this hobby, could not span universes, so we had to use 510, but that's not the case anymore. 512 is perfectly fine. So just as long as both sides of the conversation say 512, then it's good. It could be a controller configuration. You could have the wrong color order in for the string, or you have the wrong thing on the wrong port, strings in the wrong port, or it could be a bad FACQ file. You need to render and save in that order for the sequence to be properly rendered. So let's get into flickering. So common causes of flickering. This one is a little more complicated, and there's too many variables involved: wire size, distance of runs, things like that. So low power, if you've got a long run or a lot of lights, that could be an issue. You could have a weak data signal. If you've got a lot of lights or you don't have a sufficient ground, that could cause flickering. You could have loose or dirty connections. If you're using Phoenix connectors, test those and tighten them, especially if you use the tinned ends. The heat and cool, the warming and cooling of those wires as the lights go on and off, those wires will get warm, and that solder in there can soften up. And if you didn't tighten that down really good, it could get loose. So you want to tighten that up. I suggest with any controller, after you put it together, the following year, before you put it out, tighten all your Phoenix connectors. And I would do that for probably your first 3 years. Just check them, make sure that they're tight. I have seen a lot of connectors burn up because they weren't tight. Could be damaged wire. A lot of the pixels and stuff that we use in this hobby, the wire is really small and there's not a whole lot there, and that wire can get damaged. It could be a bad network cable, especially if you're using receivers. Another common cause of flickering is you've got multiple devices sending data out at the same time. You might have a sequence playing, and you might have X lights open and the output to lights on, or you might have a test pattern going from X lights or your controller, and you're also playing a sequence, and that could cause a problem as well. And the last one is the first 6 pixels white and the rest odd color. This is because you have a controller configured, or a receiver configured as being in normal mode, but you have the sending device, whether it's X lights or whatever, saying that it's a smart receiver. Now, receivers can be daisy chained. When you're daisy chaining them, not all of them, but the newer ones, what are called smart, can be daisy chained. But if you're not daisy chaining them, they can be run in normal mode, which a lot of people call dumb mode. If you're not daisy chaining them, just set them to run in normal mode. And pixel stuck on solid white. Now this is almost always a 12-volt low signal threshold. As the voltage goes through the positive wire, the voltage in the ground wire will climb as well. And if you get to a threshold where you've drawn so much current through the wires that the voltage in that ground wire gets too high, then you cannot get a proper WS2811 signal. So when your sequence flashes all white, that voltage rises in the ground wire and you can't get a signal through it. And so they won't turn off. And the only way is to power cycle the controller. And the only fix for that is going to be typically an F amp might work, or you've got to beef up your ground wire somehow. But that's not that common of an issue. All right, so let's get into the demo. So we have here 3 props you see here, and I have X lights here. You see here, I've got a test pattern. It's bars. They're all going up. They're all going left. And then if you look here, you see here that the onion ornament and this ornament here for this last section here, they're not playing a bars pattern. Neither one of those are playing a bars pattern. Remember I talked about rendering? Well, X lights will render on the fly. As long as you check on the effect, it will render it as soon as you click on it. But I made some controller configuration changes, and I didn't render this. And if I output to lights, you'll see here, yeah, you'll see that the onion and the hexagon ornament are playing directly how it is here. If I render this, they're supposed to be playing correctly. But if you see in X lights, they're playing here. But obviously, we got some problems. This wouldn't be a demo if I didn't have problems. So now in X lights, it's showing correctly. So let's see what we got here. So the issues that we got, what do we see? So the onion got 1 pixel out. Other than that, he's playing fine. The pattern looks like it's playing like it should be. The hex, we got several pixels the wrong color. They're kind of all over the place. And the singing bulb, same thing. Several pixels the wrong color. So let's get into it. So troubleshooting the onion. Issues with that it had 1 pixel out. And what did we say the common causes were? Either a bad pixel, incorrect signal, because the controller configured it incorrectly, or the model incorrect. Well, I'm pretty sure the controller configured it correctly and the model's correct. So let's go change the pixel. Okay, so I replaced that pixel. So what do? We rinse and repeat. So let's retest that. And voila, the onion is working. So that one's correct, but we still got issues with the other one. So let's go back. Okay, so now the hex, we've got several pixels the wrong color. So what's the common causes of that? Bad FSCQ file. Well, we're dealing with X lights directly. We rendered the sequence so that now it's working correctly. The sequence is correct. Strings in the wrong port. I've triple checked that. I know that that's not the case. Color shift mid string, universe size. Does that look like that could be? It looks like it. It looks like it's doing the pattern, but it's not quite right. Or it could be a controller config. So let's check our universe sizes. So what do we have in X lights? In X lights, we have 510 channels per universe. And what do we have in the controller? 512. So let's make these match. 510. Save that. Restart FPPD. Let's go to the sequencer. And got the pattern playing, and we're done, right? What? The other problem? We got one pixel out, up on that top corner. I didn't notice that before. Okay, so what's the common causes? A bad pixel, incorrect signal, controller not configured correctly, model incorrect. Let's go change that pixel. All right, so now we're done. Let's turn it on. And we're going to rinse and repeat. And what do we got? What? That pixel is still bad? Did we replace it with a bad pixel? I don't think so. So let's go back. What could be the issues? One pixel not working again. So what do we say? Bad pixel? Well, we just assumed it was a bad pixel because that's most commonly what it was. But you should check it before. So the controller not configured correctly or the model incorrect. So let's go check the model. So if we look here, let's go to turn this off. Go layout, and if we look, looky there, there is not a pixel in that corner, even though there is one. So let's go to that model and let's find out where that's missing. So go to the model data, go here, let's go to the center of this guy. And you see here, you have, starts off here, you go 85, 86, 87, 88. So 87 should be up here. 87, 88, 89, and then it goes around. So let's put an 87 in there. You can see here it lights up it right there. That looks right about where it should be. So let's say OK. And let's save this. And because we changed something here, we need to push that to the controller. Anytime you change a pixel count, a location, anything like that, you have to upload the output to the controller. So it says down here, upload complete. We're good. So let's go back to the sequencer. Click on this. Output to lights. And what do we got? Did we not working? Did we render it? And now it's working. Bada bing, bada boom. Okay, now we are on to, and like I mentioned, you don't want to test for pixels from a sequence, and you can see why. Test it from a pixel tester or an F test or from the controller test. Don't test it from a sequence. So let's go troubleshooting the bulb. We got several pixels the wrong color. It's kind of a jumbled mess there. So what's the causes of that? Typically, color shift mid-string, universe size. No, we fixed that already earlier. The controller configuration, that could be. Strings in the wrong port. No, we're good with that. A bad FACQ file we've rendered twice already, so that's not the case. But there's one thing that's a little more distinguishing. As you talked about, first 6 pixels white, and the rest were an odd color. And that's due to the smart receiver configuration. So let's look and see what we have. So if we go to our controller, I got to turn off the output to light, and we go to visualize that controller, and we see here that this is configured for a smart receiver A. Let me go look at the receiver and see what it is configured for. Okay, so I went over, the receiver was configured in normal mode, so I switched it over to be on A. I could have done, if I was doing this for myself, I would have changed X lights to be normal mode, but that would require controller config and everything else. So it's just a lot easier just for me to flip that switch. So let's see what it does now. And it looks like it's doing the right thing. So we're gonna rinse and repeat, and we're good. So are we done? Well, we tested the lights themselves. We know the lights themselves work, but let's do a solid color test from X lights. We're going to do a pattern test from X lights to make sure things are working right. So let's go in and do that. So I have over here, I have this set up here to do just a pattern test. And you can see here in X lights, everything should be doing the same thing. Red, green, blue, red, green, blue. Go through. So let's see if that's what they're doing. What? Grr. Okay, so what's the problem? So multiple pixels, wrong color. So this is, yeah, they're all the wrong color. Not just kind of an oddball there. When it's green, it's blue and vice versa. So is it a color shift midstring? No, it's the whole thing. Controller config? Could be. Strings in the wrong port? No, that's good. Bad FACQ? We know we did it. So the controller config. So let's go look at the controller config. So we look here, onion. It's configured as GBR. Let me go over and turn off the output to lights. So somehow this got configured to be GBR. So we're going to change it to RGB, save it, restart FPPD. And while that's restarting, let's go see how this might have happened. So if we go to X lights, go to the layout, and we're going to click on that onion. And you can even see up here, it says GBR. So when this got pushed to the controller, it configured it to be that way. So you want to go down here. Now there's 2 places that you could set the color order. You could set it in the string properties down here. And if you change it, you only want to set it one. If you set it in the string properties, then that means X lights is going to manage the color. So if it's wrong, You'll have to go into Xlights, but then you have to re-render all of your sequences. If your controller supports it, then I would suggest changing it here. Make this RGB here. And actually, we're going to say, we're not going to set the color because it's just going to, by default, be RGB. But if it's other than RGB, oops, then you're going to set it there. Save it. And then now it's not going to be RGB. And let's go through and test and see what we have. Should be all doing red, green, blue, red, green, blue. And what do we have? Everything is red, green, blue, red, green, blue, red, green, blue. Awesome. Okay, so at this point, if you still have issues, if the pixels are working correctly, but they don't display correctly from the sequence, then there's a few other things to check. One of the most common one is render and save in that order. A lot of times people will render, but they won't hit save. Save does not update the FSEQ. Render just does it locally in memory. You have to do saving it to change it. And then push that up to whatever device is needed. If you're doing a player remote, push it to the players and remotes. If it's just the player, push it to that. Double, triple check your port connections. I have helped people in the Zoom room numerous times where they insist that their pigtails are marked. They have it on the number. There's no way they could be in the wrong port. They were in the right port yesterday. And we'll go through and do a port by port test. And then they find out that it was not in the correct port. Some of them, I had to really convince them to even allow us to do the test. Some of the people didn't want to even try it because they were so insistent. But it was when we finally basically forced them to do it that they did. So recap. Don't assume something is correct. Test everything. Test your pixels from a known source. Start from the pixels, work your way back, and then after that, test the pixels from a sequence. So you want to isolate the problem, test it, rinse and repeat. If you have problems or need help of any kind, the Zoom room is great. I've got a video going to the Zoom room, how to use it. People there pretty much 24/7, 365 days a year, just waiting to help. The forums are good. Facebook is good. But the Zoom room, you pretty much get instant help and you get the problem and walk all the way through and they explain how it's going. In the forums and Facebook, a lot of times you can get incorrect information or incomplete information, and it'll take you a long time going back and forth to get it done. But that's pretty much what you need, and I hope this helped you out in fixing your show. Have a good one, and I hope the kids enjoy what you're doing for them. Have a good one.